Yes, good morning, everybody. A warm welcome to all of you here and also the online audience, a warm welcome. I think we can say we all enjoyed a fabulous evening yesterday, thanks to the Wallenberg Foundation, and with a warm welcome to the laureates, of course, as well. I would now like to introduce Mr. Marcus Wallenberg to say the opening speech.
Good morning and hello everybody. Great to see you. We'll continue yesterday's evening and we're going to hear from our laureates today, which is a great thing. And Johanna Buchet and her team has really put together a very interesting program this morning, so I hope you're going to enjoy it, and please let the debate flow, which I think is always good for these events. The young researchers, I said that last night, but it is really nice that we have young researchers in the room and who are following what we're doing. And I really want to thank you for making the effort to come and join us and to continue this very important work going forward. So let us have a really good day today, and thank you for being here. Then I leave the word back to you, I guess, Jan Gert?
Yep.
Thank you. Welcome.
And then we continue the program, and I'm very happy to introduce to you the first speaker. We will have 3 speakers this morning. So the first speaker is one of the laureates, Joseph Buongiorno. Please, and yeah, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm very happy to be with you. Thank you for taking some time to listen to my talk. My talk is about 2 subjects. One is the methodology, how to model for forecasting the production and prices of forest products, not just wood, but also its derivatives, from soundwood to wood-based panels to pulp and paper. And the other is an attempt to see, with the same methodology, what are the implications of climate change. I have some places to thank for the support that I received. First, my university, the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And over the years, I got a lot of support from the USDA Forest Service. In fact, the presentation that I will give you was supported by the USDA Forest Service. When we look at the effect of climate change on forestry, we have to recognize that climate change has many aspects. It's very complex. So to get a handle on it, we really have to decompose to the basics. Try to see what can we understand and really measure of this climate change. One thing that we can measure fairly accurately is the temperature. So what I will be doing is to concentrate on the effect of temperature over the long term. We know from basic chemistry that the photosynthesis, the rate of photosynthesis, is affected by temperature. When the temperature is very cold, then you get very little photosynthesis, very little growth of trees or any plant. Photosynthesis is the basic formula for all of life, essentially. And at low temperature, it doesn't work. As temperature increases, the rate of photosynthesis increases. So for trees, it means that the trees are going to grow faster. But up to a point which is the optimal temperature for given species in a given area. After that point, then it's a disaster. Very quickly, the growth crashes. And I would like to show you some of the numbers that I have obtained to show the effect of this change in temperature on the development in the forest sector. Because change in photosynthesis is going to imply differences in the rate of growth of trees and all its consequences. Consequence for wood supply, consequence for the price of wood and its derivative, consequence for the consumption of the product, their production, their international trade, and also consequences for the amount of CO2 that we store in trees in the forest. The methodology that I have used for this project is the Global Forest Product Model, GFPM in short. This picture describes the cover of the book of a rather initial development of the GFPM. It happened at the request of the FAO, which was in trouble at the time because people had retired. Philip Wardell and Stan Printle had retired, and they needed a way to make their long-term global assessment. And they contacted us at the University of Wisconsin. We hesitated to say yes, but finally we said yes, because we thought we could adapt a model that we had previously, a model of the pulp and paper industry that we called PAPYRUS. We thought that we could adapt that model and generalize it to cover the whole forest sector globally. And we did it. We ended up with a model with 180 countries. It was not our choice. At the beginning, I proposed, well, let's work with regions. Let's work with Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America. No, 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 Mafachibeta told me. I want the projections by countries. Well, I hesitated for a while, but finally I said yes, and we ended up indeed with a model with 180 individual countries. And for each, we had data on forest area, the stock of trees in this area, the CO2 stored in those trees, and data on 14 groups of products ranging from fuel wood to soundwood, wood-based panels, pulp and paper products. And for each of the products in each of the country, we established data on the production, the consumption, the imports and exports, and the prices, with the hope that we could project those elements over time. Since this happened, it was around 1997. Since this happened, there were further developments with my students. Some of them were displayed here with their hard work. We updated the model many times, and the current version is the version with the base year 2020, which includes the most recent data of the FAO, which go up to 2021. What we do to establish the base year, we take the average of 2021, 2020, and 2019. So we say this is the base year from which we are going to do the forecast. By the way, the model is free for the taking. If you type my name in Google, you will have access to my website, and you can download the software for the GFPM. If you want to change the model, you can even download the source code. There is a full data set corresponding to the study that I am going to show you, and you are welcome to use it. If you use it for non-profit organization, it's free. If you are at the university or a non-profit, you don't have to worry about giving me any money. If you do it for a for-profit company, let's say, then I am asking you to make a gift to the University of Wisconsin Foundation that will support scholarship for some students. Thank you. So this slide shows the general structure of the model within a particular country. We start from the stock of trees in the forest. From it, we can derive industrial wood or fuel wood. With the industrial wood, we can make sound wood, plywood, particle board, fiber board, or we can make intermediate products like mechanical pulp and chemical pulp, with which we will make a newsprint, printing and writing paper, other paper and paperboard. We can also recycle part of those goods and combine with other pulp, produce again more paper and paperboard. This flow of products is described mathematically within each one of the countries, of the 180 countries. And what we are trying is to see how this flow moves over time. There are two phases, what I call two phases in the GFPM. One is the static phase. The static phase describes the situation of the market, global market, at a particular point in time. And the calculation is based on the theory of the social surplus established by Samuelson in 1952. He made the observation that markets operate like an optimization. What markets do is to maximize the social surplus, which is the value of the product, symbolized here, minus the cost of production, symbolized here, minus the cost of shipping the product from one country to another. That's what markets are doing. That was the observation of Samuelson. Subject to the equilibrium condition that supply must balance demand. So everything that is imported of a particular product in a country plus what is made in that country must balance what is consumed in the country plus what is used in making other products plus what is exported from the country. And that must be true for each country, each one of the 180 countries and 14 product group that we are considering. It's a beautiful formulation, really. Just two equations that are general enough to cover the entire forest sector. Of course, it will take a lot of work for me and my students to get all those parameters, right? The elasticities of demand with respect to price and GDP, for example, and the input-output coefficients, how much round wood you need per unit of sound wood that you are producing. All those data are to be generated somehow for all the products and countries. It is also a beautiful formulation because not only through the primal does it give you the quantity produced, consumed, imported, exports, but with a dual solution, which you obtain simultaneously in the calculation. With the dual solution, you obtain the prices at which the demand is going to balance the supply. The calculation is done by a program called BMPD. It's an interior point dual dual quadratic programming system developed by Csaba Mészoró. He is at the Hungarian Academy of Science. And he was kind enough to give us free again, as long as it was used in the GFPM and not used for other purposes. He gave it to us, which means it's fully integrated, and you don't have to spend any money to finance Lindo, who will charge thousands of dollars for an optimization model, for example. So this was the static phase, the calculation of the equilibrium at a particular point in time. It's very fast, 0.56 seconds. On an ordinary computer, 0.56 seconds. It amazes me how rapidly the calculation is done. But once you have done the calculation for a particular year, then you have to project it for the next year. The program works by iteration from one year to the next. And that dynamic phase, linking the present to the future condition, takes much more time. In fact, a run of the entire model for 50-year projection takes about half an hour. There are many conditions in this dynamic phase. You need to project, for example, what will be the technical change. How much pulp will you need per ton of paper next year? It's going to change due to the fact that we use more waste paper, for example, instead of using virgin fiber. So all of that has to be calculated, and it takes time. For our purpose, the main equation in the dynamic phase is the equation that establishes the change in forest stock. The inventory in a particular year must be equal to the inventory in last year plus the growth of that inventory minus the harvest. Right? Now, the growth must be a function of the change in forest area, on one hand, and the change in the rate of growth of the trees on the area that remains. And it is here, in that parameter, that we can introduce the effect of climate change. And that's how we are going to do it. We can do it by using some of the data available. In fact, the idea of the project came to me when I read the article by Wei and Oren in Tree Physiology in 2010. What they did was to collect masses of data all around the world about how trees are growing at different temperature. And they established with those data the equations for boreal forest, temperate forest, and tropical forest, equation that predicts the effect of temperature on the growth of trees in that location. And based on those equations, I was able to calculate for different scenarios what will be the effect of the change in temperature only, okay? We forget about anything. Like I said at the beginning, we have to concentrate on one element at a time. So here we concentrate on temperature only. And what I was able to establish was the effect of temperature, different level of temperature, according to the scenario. I used the scenario of the IPCC, the International Panel for Climate Change. There are 3 of them here. The first one, the B2, which implies a rise in temperature of 2.4 degrees centigrade over 100 years. The A1B, that implies 2.8 degrees of temperature over 100 years, and the last one, A2, that implies a 3.4 rise in temperature. And you see the result based on the equation of Wei and Oren. The results show a positive response to increase in temperature in the boreal zone, some effect, some positive effect also in temperate zone, but a large negative effect in tropical zone, right? And it is those parameters that we will now introduce in the GFPM to try to see what are going to be the consequences for the whole sector of this rise in temperature. We have to consider many industries, from logging to house construction. I was raised in France, as some of you may know, and you can hear from the sound of my voice, the Franglish also, that I am so amazed when I look at the people building houses in the United States with sticks and a flake board. I mean, look at that. All the floor made of flake board and structural elements made of flake board too, with some solid wood, but not much of it. That's a major sector where wood is utilized in different forms. But there are other sectors. Very important is the pulp and paper industry, which is critical in Wisconsin, for example, where I spent many years. So let's see some of the data that will show the effect on those industries of a rise, global rise in temperature. The table shows the impact on wood production, total wood production. That's fuel wood plus industrial wood. By the way, globally, it's about 50-50. Globally, we consume about the same amount of fuel wood as industrial wood. But of course, it's different in different regions. In Africa, for example, it's consumption of a lot of fuel wood, very little production of industrial wood. It's exported, what is made. In other places, like North America, well, little fuel wood consumption and lots of industrial wood consumed. So the table shows for two scenarios, these are the extreme scenarios, the B2 and the A2. It shows the impact of the rise in temperature after 50 years. The projection is for 2070. So we start the simulation in 2020. We introduce the annual rate of increase of temperature, and we observe over 50 years the effect of the rise in temperature on production. The data are in million cubic meter of production in the year 2070 then, and the data show the difference between the simulation with impact of temperature and without, right? And here are the results for countries that have many trees in boreal zones, like Canada, for example. You can see that in 2070, due to climate change, the production will be 10% to 40% higher than without climate change. I mean, I should not even say climate change, I would say without the increase in temperature. Other places where there will be a strong increase, Russia, 9% impact in 2070 to 14%. That gives an idea of the range of possibilities. Sweden, even 7% to 11%. France, nothing. Finland, 7% to 11%. So a substantial impact of just this effect of temperature. On the other hand, if you look at zones where, at tropical zones, look at Brazil, for example, in South America. There, the effect is negative. Right? Minus 5% to minus 8% production. The production is lower by about 5% to 8% in 2070 due to the change in temperature. If you summarize the data, you can see the difference between the developing and the developed world. The positive impact of the rise in temperature on production in developed country and the negative impact in developing country is almost symmetric. Like I told you, the beauty of the system is that you can get the price effect also. And of course, for an economic point of view, having the prices is critical. The chart show the difference in wood prices under scenario B2 and A2. The difference in wood price year by year due to the increase in temperature. In scenario A2, for example, this is the pattern. A decrease in price of about 4 to 5% over a 50-year period for industrial roundwood. The effect is less important for the more elaborate products like soundwood and chemical pulp. In the B2 scenario, the effect on price is practically zero, negligible. When you have the data on quantities, quantity produced, quantity consumed, and the data on price, then you can calculate for the whole sector, the whole industries put together, you can calculate an indicator like the value added. The value added is the value of the product, the value of all the products produced in the sector, minus the cost of producing them. It is the return to capital and labor, if you want. And this is the impact measured in $1 million under the two scenarios, B2 and A2. You see the places where there is a positive impact, about 1.6 billion to 3.3 billion in Canada, for example, 4% to 10%. On the other hand, negative impact, like in Brazil, 2 billion to $3 billion, minus 4% to 9%. That's the reduction in value add in Brazil due to the increase in temperature over 50 years. So it is substantial. In Indonesia, we have the same pattern of the negative impact. On the other hand, in Europe, the impact is not that big, but positive, not that big relatively. I mean, in billions of dollars, it's substantial. If we summarize the data, you may be interested in Sweden, by the way. Here it is. Here it is for Sweden, 4% to 2% relative impact. Finland has better, 4% to 6% positive impact. If we summarize the data for all developed and developing countries, we observe again the asymmetry. The developed country benefiting, their value added increases under the climate change, even under just that dimension, the temperature impact, and the developing countries suffer. Another thing that we can look at is the amount of carbon that is stored in the forest. The picture is black to give this idea that we are interested in the carbon that the trees are containing. And these are the data. They are in million tons of CO2 equivalent, and it is again the impact. In the year 2070, the impact of the change in temperature. You can see the negative effect in Brazil, for example, 4% to 6%. In Indonesia, 3% to 5%. On the other hand, the positive effect. Canada, an increase of 5% to 9%, Sweden 2% to 5%. Russia is a big one, 8.5 billion ton. The difference in 15 billion ton difference, 5 to 9%. So, to conclude, we have looked at some of the market effect of temperature change over a long period, half a century, we have observed that the results are very much scenario dependent. You saw the big difference in all the results between the B2 and the A2 scenario. So it depends a lot on the basic assumption that you are making regarding the evolution of the economy, for example. This is why we should think of the results not really in terms of prediction, but in terms of projection. They are conditional results. If you assume this, then this is what you have to expect. But the information still, I think, is precious in terms of decision making. We have observed that the general effect of a rise in temperature will be a lowering of the world prices. The world prices are measured by the unit value of export. We observed also the very much contrast between developed and developing countries. The pattern in general, developed countries benefiting, developing countries losing. It's the same even from CO2 sequestration. We always observe the dichotomy, north versus south. So what can we do about this? Well, I am counting on the young researchers that we have in the room. It's all yours, guys. It's all yours. What could you do? One thing is to improve the representation of climate change. We have looked just at this dimension of the change in temperature, but there are many other impacts of climate change, especially catastrophic events, large fires, storms, which seem to happen more synchronously. But what I hope is that you get the message that you have the methodology whereby if you can quantify, even just estimate. You don't need hard data. If you have just soft data, what Jeff Forrester calls soft data, that is to say, an idea of what the impact could be, then you can use a methodology like the GFPM or something else, if you prefer, and find out what the economic impact will be. Another area that I think would be interesting to look at from the point of policy is this contrast of the north versus the south. That's the general thing that we observed in so many areas of environmental change, the north versus the south. So could we think of ways of extracting by taxing, or I don't know which method that should be studied, of extracting this value add that we have observed in the northern countries and transfer it to developing countries. Maybe through reforestation projects, for example, or some intervention like that. But again, it's up to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph.
Thank you.
Wonderful work.
Thank you.
Wonderful work. We do have time for some questions, if you want to. Anyone? Birger.
Thank you for a very nice presentation. I agree very much with what you have said about the importance.
Thank you.
But I was wondering, you have a very simple temperature model.
Yes.
And in Finland, Sweden, and several other countries, they have done complicated studies with complicated ecological models.
Yeah.
Sorry, what did you say?
No, but my philosophy, the simpler the better. Yes. Yes. Yes, make it as simple as you can so that you can communicate it. And people can observe, make a comment and say, you are crazy, this doesn't work. By the way, those 180 countries that FAO wanted us to do, Civita was firm. No, I want the data by country. I bitched about it. I'm sorry, this is on record. I was upset about it. But later I realized that this was really a very useful constraint. Why? Because at the level of Africa or Latin America, you can say any nonsense. Nobody will know about what is Africa, what is Latin America. On the other hand, if you say Algeria, well, it's likely that someone out there is going to know the data for Algeria, or at least to have a working knowledge of this. And that's important, I think, to make progress. But again, going back, that communication, you will get it. At least at the beginning, it should be as simple as possible, I feel. Yes, and that complexity only if it is absolutely needed. Yeah.
Thank you. And the next question is Anne, and then Antti, and then Tom.
Okay, thank you very much, Joseph. It was extremely inspiring, as all of your presentations we have been happy to hear over the, I don't know how many decades.
Thank you.
My question is maybe related to these parameters that you mentioned, that they are always influential in this type of modeling. So the demand elasticities.
Yes.
What is your intake on the state of research ongoing about the market modeling at the moment, or do you have some suggestions that the future researchers should perhaps focus on?
Maybe we should not put too much emphasis on the estimation of parameters. Maybe it's preferable to be bold and to have some result, and then, based on the feedback, observe where the improvement has to be made. Is it really the elasticity of demand for plywood, for example, that is critical, or is it something totally different, like the input-output coefficient for chemical pulp? So that's what I will tend to do. Yes.
Antti.
Thanks. Very inspiring presentation, and I loved the beauty of how you presented linear optimization and linking subsequent years with each other.
Yeah.
In the end of your presentation, you said that the adverse impacts of climate change, like large-scale disturbances, are not in the model.
Right.
So if somebody of us or other young researchers would try to do that, would it simply be to adding that impact to the growth parameter of your model?
Yes. Conceptually, it's very simple.
Right.
Conceptually, it's very simple, but you have to get the number somehow. But after all, you should not hesitate. Some kind of a number must be out there, right? Even if there are no official statistics, I think we can even guess a particular number and then see the implication. And when you have that number, I think you can introduce it readily, yes, into the modeling structure. Yeah. Another thing that I think we could look at very easily, and that is critical now. One student should be doing that just today. Take a note and do it. There is a lot of talk about isolating parts of the forest estate to keep it for conservation purpose. Well, what is going to be the impact on the industry of doing that? I think you can do it very readily with the methodology that I have presented. Yeah. And someone should do it. Who is going to do it?
Yeah. Well,
it's your flag now to carry, gentlemen and ladies, so you have to do it.
Maybe Tom is going to do it then. But Tom,
no,
you.
that's a lot of pressure. Thanks very much. Very interesting and inspiring talk. I wanted, sort of actually bouncing off the previous question about disturbances. One of the characteristics of certainly the big disturbances we see in Europe are these kind of gluts of supply that come from large amounts of trees being killed. Does this require adjustments in your model to account for this? Is this something that fits into the very simple formulation as you describe it, or would you need to readjust parameters to account for this?
You will have to adjust the parameters for sure, yes. Keep in mind, nevertheless, that the methodology is more adapted to long-term trends projection rather than short-term fluctuations, right? What you have is a general idea of the development that will take place. But if you want to make a prediction, which I did, unfortunately, recently, I wanted to see what will be the effect of the COVID on the global forest sector. And I made a projection that were lousy. They were terrible. Yes. Yes. So I think we should refrain to have that desire of having immediate results. I think the methodology is more adapted to long-term forecasting, long-term trends. Yes.
That was the last for this. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Bummer. Yes, and well, I'm sorry to say, but the next speaker is myself, so you will be stuck with me for the next 20 minutes. So I will look into the European forests and forest industry. Does it have a future? That's the question. So European forest industry in a changing climate and policy arena, a fast changing arena. How resilient is it, and which road does it take? It's going to be a long road, a windy road. We're going to look into that. And well, I'm from Wageningen. I'm Professor of European Forest Resources. I was in the IPCC several times, and I did my PhD at the European Forest Institute with Risto at that time there and Birger. So I owe these people a lot. So then you see how generations move on, and the new generation is there in the back. So we're going to look into some climate change projections. That's the first thing to do. Then what's the state of the European forest resources now, the supply side, the management a little bit. Then we're going to look into some of the policy arena, the fast changing policy arena that affects us all, and then a little bit on the industry, we're going to look into some trends and new developments and come to some conclusions. But first, something slightly different, maybe. This is the deed of sales with which my grandpa and grandma bought their first 3-hectare farm in 1913. Anton Nabuurs and Maria Nabuurs bought that at the edge of a swamp, poor soil, 3 hectares, harsh times. But what we found this deed just 5 years ago. But what it said there in this last article, it says that those who sell the farm reserve 2 oaks, 1 alder, and some coppice. So wood was so scarce in those days that they took it even out of the sale, and the previous owner wanted to keep those 2 oaks and 1 alder. This is how scarce wood was in those years, in the Netherlands, but also in Central Europe certainly. We can hardly imagine this anymore. So nowadays we seem to have ample resources, but let's see if that is all available. A little bit on climate. Well, I'm also sorry to say, but we are all addicted to fossil carbon, all of us, myself inclusive. And we are probably amongst the top emitters in the world. Here you see this is in case of global primary energy consumption, how this has increased since pre-industrial times with traditional biomass still there. Joseph also mentioned that. Then coal came up, then oil, gas, natural gas, and then some new forms, nuclear, hydropower, wind, etc. You see that despite a lot of effort to reduce emissions, the consumption just keeps going up. The emissions just keep going up. There's a little bit of modern biofuels and solar, the yellow line that you can just barely see there. But this upcoming of new types of renewable energy is just, well, doesn't even bring down the line, but it just, well, it seems to just add on to our consumption. So that's clearly the trend, unfortunately, that we're going, and it seems we're not really able to stop that development. And this, of course, there's no doubt about it, that with these increasing greenhouse gas emissions, we are on this path of a 3-degree climate change. The yellow line is clearly the path on which we are. So there's no doubt, well, maybe the extremes will hopefully not come through, but even an SSP2, 4.5, which is roughly 3-degree change, a 3-degree global change average is an enormous change in weather and weather extremes in the world, and we're right on that path. So what does that mean for the resources? Well, this will certainly mean that if we look at this 3-species map of Europe, that these species distributions are going to change. You know, trees have their niche in which they like to grow, the climate and weather circumstances and soils where they like to grow. With a changing climate, this is certainly going to change. The light green here is the spruce, productive areas in Central Europe, but also in the north, the spruce and pine will be affected by these climate changes and the weather extremes especially. Still, there seem to be ample resources. There's more wood than ever since early medieval times, 30 billion cubic meters, unprecedented. But it doesn't mean that it's all available. It doesn't mean that there's ample resources also available. Europe was, and still is, I think, producing from these large forest areas, 40% of Europe covered with forest. Europe is still a main wood producer. Here you see the development of wood harvesting in Europe, starting around 400 million cubic meters in the late 90s, peaking in 2007 before the financial crisis, and then lowering a bit, but then picking up again in harvest volumes, now over 500 million cubic meters. The growth is much more. The growth is roughly 800 million cubic meters. You would think this 300 million cubic meters should be possible to harvest that, to have an additional harvest. But we'll look into that. That is not going to be so simple. And what's more, if you look at what sort of assortments we are harvesting, I think we are not using this very efficiently. The industry tends to be very proud of itself and say, oh, we're very efficient. We recycle paper, etc. But if you look at the total harvest in Europe, the green part is all fuel wood. That's already a lot of private households that are directly burning wood in their household stove at a low efficiency. Also a little bit of new types of biomass, bioenergy, of course, but a lot is private households. The saw logs, well, when you do the sawing, you're happy if you have a 50% efficiency. So the other 50%, well, partly goes to the pulp and paper industry, I know, or to the panel industry, but also a large part of those sawing losses are also being burned. And then the pulp, the orange line, well, you're the experts here. In the pulping, half of it becomes black liquor and is also being burned. So we're not using our resources very efficiently here. Pushing through very large volumes at a very high rate, and mostly using it only once or very short. Of the sawing, well, if you manage to have the 50% efficiency, a lot of the sawn wood is also used only relatively short. in crates and pallets. Only a small part really ends up in construction. We can improve a lot, and we will have to. So that resource, you saw the 3 species map with the spruce in Central Europe. And you know, I said, well, species have their niche where they like to grow. Well, this is spruce. In 2010, 2040, we made a projection of that under a climate envelope model. And just look at the reddish. This is where spruce can occur already. It's a bit forward already, 2010, 2040. And then we projected that and calculated the economic effects. And it should now move. Yeah. So 2070, 2100, we projected that spruce would really move high north and would only survive really high north. And it's, well, then we said, well, this is a model. It's 2070, 2100. It's far away. You know, let's not get too worried about that yet. But, well, the actuality was much faster. This is the spruce mortality in Germany, in the Harz, a picture from the Harz. All the brown is, of course, dead spruce, but the bark beetle, the spruce gets affected by drought and heat in the hot summers and is very vulnerable to bark beetle. The spruce mortality is already over 200 million cubic meters, which is unprecedented kind of mortality in Europe. And a colleague of us, Marco Patacca, also collected all that material, and in the trend line of disturbances, you clearly see that the disturbances are increasing. There is, of course, also more stock, so percentage-wise, it has also increased a bit, but percentage-wise not so much. But you clearly see the spruce coming in, or the bark beetle effects here very much. The yellow is the windstorms in the 90s and the early 2000s. So these disturbances are taking place very rapidly. What does that mean then for your resources? And this graph, I must explain a bit. This is the carbon balance for the total Czech forests. A negative means that the forests are taking up carbon, so it pulls it out of the atmosphere, so this is why it's a negative. And this is how spruce is reporting to the UNFCCC its sink in the forest. So they reported up to 2015 a considerable sink of something like 8 million tons of CO2. We then saw these spruce problems occurring, and we implemented in our forward projection model a conversion forestry where you gradually convert spruce into longer rotation deciduous, mostly beech, often there. And then when you do this conversion, of course, you take your resource through a source. When it's a plus, it's a source to the atmosphere. But we thought that if you do that conversion gradually, you can sort of try to maintain that sink, and the new regrowing forest will maintain that sink. But also there, the actuality was much different. When we looked a couple of years later at how Czech is reporting to the UNFCCC, the last couple of years they have reported a large source of CO2. So the conversion or the mortality goes so fast, and the balance of whether you have your forest resource functioning as a sink or a source, that balance is very delicate. And if you have these rapid changes, your resource immediately shoots into a source of CO2. So also this projection we can throw in the trash bin, this one. As often, our projections are not predictions. But it's not only mortality, it's also subtle growth changes that are taking place, the droughts. And this is from Antti, from Lucca, where also the NFI from Finland is reporting an increment decrease now. And since they are harvesting more, they're getting very close in the balance of growth and the amount of what you can harvest. So also there, these northern countries, also Sweden has a comparable problem, but Finland also has that problem. I'm sorry that I cannot be more positive. But yeah, so it seems that production is shifting south, and there's of course also other trends and other drivers that have pushed the production very much to the south. In the northwest of the US, the production moved especially to the southeast, the Atlantic zone of Brazil with eucalyptus plantations. South Africa was a reasonable production zone. China is coming up with a lot of new plantations. And also here in the New Zealand and the Australian area, the production is increasing. So it seems that from the traditional US, Europe, as the main forest industry countries, that this production is moving south. And it's not only that, we also have other problems, geopolitical. Well, Russia is basically out of the trade for the next 10 to 20 years. So also that enormous resource, a quarter of the world forest, is basically out of the trade. So we saw this, Russian wood to a large degree off the market, strong protection in Europe is also taking place. Fragmented ownership plays its role as well. And other regions, well, an example is, for example, British Columbia has been a very important producing region, but because it sort of oversupplied due to also mountain pine beetle problems, it oversupplied for a time, so they will start undersupplying in the coming years. And of course in Europe, we will come to that as well. Protection, well, biodiversity is under pressure, and changing the management and partly protecting and changing the management is a direction that Europe is taking as well. And if you ever come to the Netherlands, you can visit these beautiful forests there. A little bit about the policies. And well, you might think this is not a policy photo here, but policy is about people. It's all about people. We talk a lot about trees, but in fact it's all about people, what we're doing. And this is a walnut provenance trial that we have. So the EU policy environment was very simple up until the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a common agriculture policy. There was a bit of a forest strategy, rather simple. A strategy doesn't say much. Some action plans and some live programs in the execution. But well, and there was international processes. So it was very simple. Also then, well, many also complained that Brussels was not interested, didn't have an interest in forest. But I think we have nothing to complain about anymore. Well, you don't need to read all of this. You can later look at it at the slides. But yeah, there's an enormous growth of regulations and strategies related to forests. And I must thank Helga Pulsel here of EFI. Only just last Sunday, the forest monitoring regulation came out or leaked or whatever you want to call it. There's where am I? I can't even find it here. The nature restoration law, of course, heavily discussed, resulting also in guidelines, the regulation on the non-deforestation goods, the Birds and Habitats Directive still active, renewable energy directives. There's a massive growth of all sort of policies related to forests. And that is the arena in which the member states, the industry in my mind, the forest owners and the Commission in this wild arena, they have to find their common ground. But this massive growth of policies also leads to what is called the responsiveness gap. The member states and the active forest owners, they basically don't know what to do anymore. Some policies push for SINC, the LULUCF policies. Other policies push towards more wood harvesting, bioeconomy, renewable energy directive, etc. So going in a wide direction. And when is it good and when is it not good? That's, I think nobody has the answer to that. A little bit on the industry. How has the industry functioned here? And this is from the Finnish forest industries. Well, you see the production lines generally moving up, also in line with the harvesting volumes that have moved up. I think the main change that has taken place, of course, is that newspaper print really went down, and other commodities have gradually, well, cardboard and such for the online shopping, they gradually took over. That is the main change, I think, that has taken place. And of course, a large interest in these new bio-based products. You also see them on the posters here outside. Bio-based products, wood-based textiles, where you see the investments in refineries, in wood-based foam, much research and startups in these new products. We're really breaking through. That is difficult as long as we have ample resources of cheap fossil carbon. It's very difficult to break through in such a world, and only with, I don't know what, maybe taxes or or taking out these cheap fossil access, only then these new products can break through. And it's resource constrained. I showed you the problems in the resource. If you really want to go to high volumes, large volumes of these new products, it is resource constrained. A little bit about what we do then in Wageningen, together also with the European Forest Institute. Well, what we do is resource modeling, resource model projection at a high detailed level. Since about 10 years, we are collecting the National Forest Inventory plot data, the raw tree-wise data, and luckily 18 countries are willing to share that. It's already 18 now. That's 4.6 remeasured trees, and if you have 4.6 million remeasured trees, then you know what is really going on. You can assess the growth, the mortalities, the ingrowth, who is harvesting, who is not harvesting, etc. That's a picture of the data. And then basically every plot has a diameter distribution which you forward project. But that's not so interesting now. And then we can forward project, for example, this restoration management. This is a map of North Rhine-Westphalia, 900,000 hectares. Every bar is an NFI point. And then you see that in the 2010, there's a, well, it's hard to see, but all the lightish colors is spruce and such. Large stocks of spruce still. But then in 2050, we convert that, or it has died basically already, so we convert that into deciduous. And then you gradually see more green bars coming in, but still with a small volume. So even in 2050, you are still dealing with a small volume there, and then it's even deciduous wood. So the industry will have to adapt, or I don't know, maybe move to other regions. And this is what we also do then, very much in line with Joseph, his work, but this has been done by Nicola Bozzolan, one of the young researchers, collecting the mill site data, the individual mills with the capacity they have and the resources they need. And this is how he can analyze from the procurement area of a mill, one specific mill, where it gets its wood from, how it can get its wood. For example, analyze where new mills can be established, where not, given the resource changes that I mentioned. Speed up. The last conclusion, well, global demand certainly keeps increasing. Certainly if we cannot use fossil carbon anymore. Changing resources, I highlighted the many policies, maybe too many policies. Certainly in Europe over the last 5 years, with the Green Deal very much focused also on protection. I do think that it's not very useful to fight against Brussels, but rather try to work with them. They are not going to go away, Brussels. So it's maybe better to try and have some influence and try to move that in a certain direction. Basically, we are all Brussels. We need better integrated models. The developments that Joseph showed and the other laureates, I don't think we have such tools, but Sten will go into that very much. But also the industry has a role in this. I think the industry also needs to invest in the forest resources and not only try and buy what is available. And then as last, as I want to thank the team in Wageningen. It's their hard work that they do. And as I said, it's, well, we talk a lot about trees, but in fact, it's all about people. So, thank you. Yeah, and I don't think we have time for a question anymore, so I would like to introduce the next speaker, Sten Nilsson. Most of the people will know you here. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you for giving me the floor. And I will speak about the governmental policy making in forestry and the forest sector, and which is complex, and it requires decent and relevant analysis and models in order to do right policy making. And the policy making, the governmental policy making, is forming a lot what's going to happen in the forest and in the forest sector. So I will talk about some models and how to use them. And before that, I would like to convey my warm congratulations to the laureates. I have had the privilege to interact with them over the years here, many years, each of them, but especially Darius Adams. An anecdotal information is that I invited Darius Adams and Richard Haynes to come to the university 1980 to present the TAMM model. And the purpose was that we were organizing a seminar at the Academy of Agriculture and Forestry to try to give some injections to the actors in the forest sector in Sweden. And I must say that mildly expressed, the reception was lukewarm. So it's a pleasure to see that 43 years later, you are getting a royal reception. Congratulations. So the forest sector modeling should support the governmental policy making. And the important part is to deal with the dynamics between the policies, the forest resources and how we are managing it, the industrial production, the markets, economics, and sustainability. So far, in most countries in the world, we are lacking this holistic picture. Instead, different actors in the process, they have their specific view on the system boundaries, on the space, the time. So it means that they are talking different languages. And the models have one purpose in that respect, and that is to give a common framework for the actors in the policy process. And that is, of course, leading to the question, what is a holistic model? Yeah, this is one simple cut of it. And we have to consider, as Gert-Jan has illustrated, the international laws and regulations. And they will not be less in the future, they will be more. We have to consider the changing world outside the forest sector. We have a rather ugly world currently, and it doesn't look it will be much better in my lifetime. We have to consider the industrial production, the industrial development. So the international laws are, as Gert-Jan illustrated, a lot influencing the ecosystem services, but it's also impacting on the industry. The forest sector is generating a lot of benefits from the communities and societies, and we have to take those into account. And these together are framing what we can do in the forestry. Both is decreasing possibilities, but it's also opening up new challenges. And the situation is even worse. Most of the policy tools used by governments is just forest biophysical models. So it means that you are centering here how you are manipulating your forest. Maybe you are taking into account some of the ecosystem services components. Maybe you're looking into one or two of the benefits. But the rest you're leaving outside. So it means that you're trying to direct a bigger system with a smaller part of a system. And that can't be right. It's like driving a car without headlights, steering wheel, and wheels. And I will illustrate a couple of examples on why the biophysical models is not enough. So, US Forest Service had been chasing a quixotic timber famine for a long time in the last century. And it was based on biophysical analysis, the growth, and the industrial capacities. And by that, Forest Service created a huge harvesting program on the federal forest. And a lot of the old growth disappeared. And Adams and Haynes came in, where you took into account economics and the industrial side, and it changed completely the dynamics and the famine, the timber famine. And that was used in the Resource Planning Act by US Forest Service, so in the regular planning. And they continued to do so for a number of years, improving the TAMM system. But suddenly, US Forest Service decided to drop it and go back to more simple models of biophysical type. And so you can say that US Forest Service have taken a step backwards. We have a similar example here in Sweden. In the late 60s, we used simple biophysical models where we compared the future annual increment with the industrial capacity. And it was a lot of noisy debates, and it was about the timber sag. So the government put up a commission, in the 70s, and they said we must increase the harvest by around 15 million cubic meters. And that was in 1973. But shortly after, we had the energy crisis, we had an economic recession, we had industrial structural change, and the timber demand dropped substantially. And suddenly, we were speaking about what to do with the timber mountain. This is a long time ago, but we haven't learned much. We are still using biophysical models for our policy making, and it's called the SCAR analysis. Gert-Jan was speaking about EU, and it is rather remarkable that the European Union doesn't have a holistic system to validate their proposals or the policies from a holistic point of view on all the things they are cranking out. And I will illustrate with one issue, and it's the biomass use in a net zero emission economy. And EU has used, based on biophysical model, what the member states are saying is available, and they are comparing with how much they need. On the other side, there is a company named Material Economics, and they use integrated model, looking at all materials and energy use, resource efficiency, and the economics, and potential alternatives. And they are coming up with the conclusion that the European Union is overestimating the biomass use by 40 to 100% in comparison to what will be available. And in their high value added scenario, they are seeing that they can make much bigger cost savings, land savings, and emission savings compared to what EU is suggesting. And here are the sectors you're looking into. And one interesting part is here. That is biofuels for transport. Zero. And this is a highly political issue today. And the reason is that the biomass is too valuable for that kind of low value added products. We should use it for the high-end aviation fuel, for power generation, but not at least in the forest industry for producing forest products. So that is a completely different picture to what the European Union is having. So I'm arguing that there is a stagnation or even a regression in the use of relevant tools in the forest sector policy making. And our laureates are representing the needed category of policy analysis. And that is the right direction to go. And I will just illustrate that the TAMM model and PAPYRUS model were pioneers. And with the global trade, it was my former institute, YASA. And we have had a development of a whole family of this kind of models. But they are not used in the regular governmental policy making. And those models are mainly partial general equilibrium models. And a central part of the partial equilibrium models is the demand equation, which is based on a production theory which we have used for a long time. So this has worked quite well as long as the world trotted away on a smooth path. But how good are they at handling the abrupt structural changes and systemic shifts? Again, a couple of examples. This is newsprint consumption in the US. So in the early 90s, something happened in the United States. We have the substitution of newsprint to electronic media. And it went rather rapidly. But the models couldn't catch up that because we are using based on historical trend developments. And you can see that it's a rather big gap. And today, the consumption in the US is about 1.5 million tons compared with 14, 15. If you are looking at the newsprint at the global level, in the mid-90s, the Swedish government commissioned Boston Consultant Group to do an outlook study for the forest sector in Sweden. And they came back and said, we are very concerned, among other things, about newsprint. And that is the red bars coming from the Boston Consultant Group. And of course, they had used the transition rate back from US. It went rather rapidly. The industry didn't like that at all. So the industry commissioned to Jacob Pöyry and Risi to do our analysis. And they got happy because they said it's going to be nearly 50 million. And what was worse, they invested in hefty capacity expansions. And they are dead now, they are obsolete. So it's illustrating the risk of using those trend projections, but also that you really have to take into account what's happening outside the conventional forest sector. And as I have indicated, I expect a lot of shifts and risks in the future. And if you just look at the forestry, and Gert-Jan has already been into the two first ones, and but we also have that the forest owners are not happy with the profitability. So what can we do about that in the future? When will we see the heavy breakthroughs on biomaterial substitution? And for sure, the forest cannot support all demands. So what has to give? If you look at the industry, how disruptive will the extended BRICS be? And the Belt and Road Initiative. 500 Chinese companies have already invested along the Belt and Road. 85% of the Russian production of forest products is going to China or going through China. And as Gert-Jan said, it will be so for the next 20 years. And will the convention forest industrial production go to the south? If I compare 1990 with today, the wooden panels have gone from 18% to 70%. paper 15 to 50, pulp 8 to 30. I think this is going to continue. And the big headache is, of course, what's going to happen in the world. Here we have very rapid shifts. And it deals with the societal dimensions, the geopolitical dimensions, the digital, the economics, nature, and not at least value changes in the societies, and the value changes among the consumers. And this is connected by an incredible, complicated web of interactions. So the probability is very high that things are changing. Yeah, we also have impacts of technological changes within the conventional industry. I don't have time to discuss that. We can do it over lunch. So we have a very complex world of today, and it's full of policy shifts and policy risks. And it's obvious that the models just building on trend extrapolation and only on parts of the system, they will fail. So it's time now, we need something new and additional. My colleagues, Finnish colleagues Huumakoski and Hätemäki has proposed the implement of foresight approaches. I'm supportive of that. There are also other concepts to follow, but this is a good one. The foresight studies is that you're trying to identify and evaluate and possible and probable futures. We don't have one future, we have many futures. And you're using different scientific disciplines, mixing it with philosophy, political fingertip feeling, common sense, in order to get to that understanding. And Hätemäki has suggested a four-step way. So you're going back, trying to identify why the heck are we here today? Why have we come up here? And by exploring and scanning and arguing and challenging, trying to identify possible futures. And from that you're selecting a strategy. So one way forward, possible way forward, is to combine the foresight studies with four-sector outlook studies. And that you are using backcasting. So it means that you are starting with those alternative futures, and you're using your outlook studies to go back and see how can you bring today's situation to those futures. So, to wrap up, the four-sector policies must be set within a larger perspective and not just based on the forest resources. The forest policies and forest industry policies have to be developed in tandem. We have a rather remarkable situation among policymakers. A lot of interest is put to the forest side, but it's nearly taboo to speak about the industry development. It seems like the policymakers think that the structure we have of the industry today will be the same year 2100, and that is not the case. So we need to have a holistic view of a sector. The good old linear models are obsolete in a world full of systemic shifts, huge risks, black swans, unknown unknowns. And for that we need the foresight studies. Historically, governments and companies have had a reactive and rather sluggish handling of risks and change. In the future, we must have a proactive handling of risks, and not at least of resilience, because resilience will be crucial for survival in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sten, for this very clear message. We can take one question if there is an urgent question. Birger.
Thank you. Joseph was advocating simple models, and you are advocating probably more complicated ones, as I understand it.
Yeah.
But you also said a combination of this is possible.
Yeah.
Did I understand you correctly there?
Yeah.
So then my question is, the industry is the first driving force here, because when you do an investment in a big pulp mill, you have done it for 10, 20, probably longer. It's a sort of putty clay technology. Before you do the investment, you have a lot of options. You have done the investment, you are stuck, more or less. And my question is, do the forest industry, they must, in the board, when they decide on $1 billion of euros, or hundreds of millions of euros, they must have done very good, better analysis than those you presented from in the beginning of the 2000 or 1990s. That's my question. What is your impression about the board in the forest industries on that respect?
Let me start in the following end. Yes, you're right. The volume of investment in the industry, especially with pulp and paper, they are big, huge. So in a way, you're stuck in a certain situation due to the heavy investments. But I think you have to go back or go further than just looking into the individual mill. Let's take an example of a pulp mill. What can that pulp mill do further down the road? And I'm not sure. Yes, the industry is of course doing better analysis in comparison when the government is doing. But I'm not sure that they are that much better. I have had the privilege to look into a number of board meetings about taking decisions about the investments in new capacities. And you are astonished how unsharp the pencils are. It's completely other factors in the end deciding what is going to be invested in. And very often people are going in with a certain view to that process. This is the way to go, and they're not willing to change it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. No. Then we come to the moment suprême. I would like to say the announcement. As you know, yesterday the young scientists presented in the 3-minute presentations their work, and it's set up as a competition. And now we will hear who has won the competition. And Joris van den Akker will announce that. Joris.
I think we start with the film. This is the announcement.
An unnecessary way to use fossil-based plastics is for daily hygiene products, such as diapers, as the waste compromises our planet. But still, we continue doing so due to a lack of industrially feasible bio-based alternatives. Well, that could end now as my solution develops scalable, eco-conscious hygiene products by harnessing the power of trees. The global baby diaper market alone amounts to $60 billion and is predicted to grow for every year. A baby typically uses 4,000 diapers in 2 years, contributing to 2 to 6% of Europe's municipal solid waste. Diaper usage also emits roughly 3 million tons of greenhouse gases annually, nearly equal to the yearly emissions of a country the size of Malta. The villain? Fossil-based plastics. Plastics make up to 40% of a diaper's absorbing core. These specific plastics consist of super-absorbent polymers, as they can absorb and retain large amounts of liquids, even under the load of a baby's weight. Properties that are very difficult to achieve with today's bio-based alternatives. Therefore, my vision to ensure a circular society was to develop bio-based superabsorbents by designing a dual-layer product. First, I developed a highly porous, low-density material called an aerogel from cellulose fibers. Second, I disintegrated cellulose fibers into long and slender nano-sized fibrils to prepare nanofibril sheets. The combination of these two materials enables a dual functionality. The highly porous fiber aerogel absorbs and spreads the liquid very quickly to the nanofibrillous sheet that stores the liquid, even under pressure, a trait not commonly achieved for most cellulose products until now. The beauty of this new sustainable solution is the simplicity, which will allow for industrial upscaling across the entire hygiene product market. And at the end of life, energy recovery is possible as the waste can be used to produce biogas as a source for renewable energy. My name is Joan Rostami, and my solution will develop eco-conscious hygiene products that meet growing market demands without sacrificing the environment for future generations to come. Thank you.
You all have understood that she was the winner, and she was the winner for many purposes. So these 3-minute presentations actually is a real challenge, and we had 31 yesterday. And I explained that they all were winners because this is probably selected as the best, but all were very good, extreme, very nice thing. And you can follow them. You will find them on the website, and you will be able to see this kind of 3-minute, one-slide presentations. But I want to congratulate for sure Joan Rostami, and I invite her to come to the floor here. And I should also announce the other 2 persons that are being selected through the people from the selection committee, but definitely also by the students themselves. Stefania Bertella and Jagmur Bas should come for the 2nd and 3rd prize, and they should normally get this nice certificate from me or from... Good. Right. Congratulations. I think we have to go with a picture thing like that. Really congratulations. Stefania, congratulations. Very well. Jagmur, congratulations. Huh? Probably you should stand all 3 together in front of this
and have one nice picture like that. Okay, thanks a lot. Of course, I should announce also you have already seen that all 31 posters are outside. You can discuss with these 3 individuals, but also with the other young researchers, their work. They are not able to present it here on stage. They did yesterday for the group, but for each of you, it can be of interest to go to some specific one and discuss with the young researchers that are present. And as Gert-Jan already said, our future is over there.
Thank you all, and for being back here so punctually on time. Very nice, very welcome again here in the panel discussion. We have about 50 minutes for a panel discussion on the topics that we saw earlier this morning. So I will first introduce the panelists. I will say their name and they will introduce themselves briefly, and then we get going with a number of discussion items. I will certainly also try and get the audience involved, and that means also the young scientists, certainly as well. So feel free to comment, put questions, make brief statements. That's all very welcome. And you can also address, of course, a certain panelist or the panel as a whole. Thank you all. Well, the first panelist, I'll start from Jussi Kumpula.
So, hello everybody, my name is Jussi Kumpula. I'm Managing Director of Metsähallitus Forestry Company. Our company is a subsidiary of Metsähallitus, so I represent state forest in Finland. And I have a large experience, over 30 years experience in Metsähallitus in different positions, but I have also working in different countries like in Canada, Australia, Honduras, and a bit in Brazil as well.
Thank you.
In Sweden also.
Sweden as well. Max, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Maximilian Schulte. I'm German and I do my PhD at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences since 2020. I focus in my PhD about climate impact assessments from the product level, forest product level, over assessments about forest management, how it influences the climate to the entire forest sector, meanwhile also making applications of a forest sector model.
Hello everybody, my name is Liis Roveder and I'm the CEO of WWF Finland. It's my honor to be today here in this panel. I have 40 years experience on sustainable development. It was established in 1986 and after that I have been working on that and I have also a PhD degree on that.
Thank you. And Elisabeth.
Yeah, my name is Elisabeth Salander Björklund and I have spent more than 40 years in forestry and forest industry. I spent my first 13 years in the state forest and then 15 years in Stora Enso in different executive management positions and the last 9 years in Bergvik Skog. I have also been working quite a lot with sustainability issues within Stora Enso. At that period I was there. I'm also a private forest owner, a board professional nowadays. Among other things, I'm also a board member of the Swedish State Forest, Sveaskog.
Thank you very much. All very impressive. Well, we will move on to the first topics. We saw some of it this morning, that well, these trends in the forest industry do not seem always so flourishing, so positive. So what if we would lose the forest industry from Europe? And lose maybe strongly reduced or even totally lose it. You see, how do you see that? How would that impact Metsähallitus, or what is your view on what are the pros and cons of that when we lose the forest industry?
So thank you. My point of view is quite practical and forest owners' view. Because we are selling roundwood to the industry, and I feel that future quite confident. if you think big picture and population in the world, it's growing all the time, standard of living is growing, it means that the demand of these products are growing. I think so. And the fact is that we have to replace these fossil-based products by forest products, for example. That's the reason I feel this future confident, and I feel that our forest industry will flourish at least to the next 30 years, because the industry will make investments for the 30 years at a time. And after that, they have to check time, is it time to make a new investment or no.
So you have a much more positive view of
I feel positive, but I feel also that if you think about the south and north, it means that the production will increase in the south more than in the north. Because the population is there and there are resources, there are possibilities. But if you think of the south, in the south they might become a conflict between agricultural production, because forestry is competing with the agriculture at the same time, and that's the fact. And in the future we might face a lack of food in some areas.
Maybe I do not always follow the line there. So maybe Lisa, from a WWF point of view, how would you see that if we lose the forest industry in Europe?
I would say that from biodiversity perspective, it's always important that the forest industry is sustainable. So it doesn't make any difference wherever the industry is located. You always need to think about the biodiversity, because also the industry's future depends on the state of the biodiversity. And on the other hand, as we heard already in these high-level scientific modeling presentations, so that there is evidence that there will be more pulp production in south. But on the other hand, I think that maybe the value-added production, like bio-based products, will then anyway move or be more based here in the Nordics, where we have also the technological competence to make those products. Biodiversity anyway is the key, and it doesn't matter where the forest industry is located. You always need to think about that.
Okay. Well, we may come back to that. Max, how would you, maybe you want to, it's up to you of course, but maybe you want to highlight also the carbon aspect.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's up to you.
From biodiversity, I would shift over to the climate effects actually. And if we want to achieve climate change mitigation in the forest sector in Sweden nowadays, from the past studies which were published over the past years, we know that by decreasing, for example, the harvest intensity in Sweden, we would get a large climate benefit from the additional forest carbon sink in the Swedish forests. So that goes into the direction of the scenario that you were just mentioning, if we reduce, so to say, forest industry's activity in Europe. This is nice from the Swedish perspective if we get this additional forest carbon sink, where we also know that the foregone or the not not the realized substitution effect will not cancel off this gain in forest carbon. But the point is now that also based on the forest sector models that we have today, we don't know how large the forest carbon leakage will be. And leakage here is a central term, I would say, because this gain in forest carbon that we may have here in Sweden, we don't know how much forest carbon we may lose in the rest of the world, and where in the rest of the world that may be, because this then depends on the trade.
Yeah, thank you. And Elisabeth, you want to reflect on this?
Yeah, I think that to begin with, forestry is a long-term thing to work with. And I mean, sustainability is a key and is really hard in working with forestry. And I absolutely do believe that we will have long-term a forest industry up here in the north part of the world also. I do think that the industry will change anyhow. I mean, we will not produce exactly the same type of products. We will produce new type of products. But I absolutely believe that we will have an industry up here in the future. That's my belief.
Thank you. And feel free to raise your hand if you want to comment or add. Birger here, please. Yeah, the mic is coming. The online people.
Just a comment on the leakage. It was mentioned by you. I just want to point to the fact that there are at least 3 studies on leakage. And they all show more or less the same, that the leakage is between 70 and 90%. Studies done by Risto here and Marit Kallio and myself and others. So we know a lot about the leakage. Thank you.
Antti, here's another question here in the middle.
Thanks for Gert-Jan for a very provocative question. There are areas in the world where there is no forest industry and where there is forest and that forest is unmanaged. And there the good old Mother Nature takes care of the forests, meaning the carbon cycle is natural based on the large-scale forest disturbances in boreal zone, and also the if we would move to that situation really in Europe, it would only mean that forest would be managed by Mother Nature. So it would turn to the same situation where we are in California, that it's rather maybe only management would be firefighting and clearing roads to be able to traffic. But it would be really extreme, but there would be in forest management a very, very natural one.
Yeah. Thank you. You are certainly, Jussi and Elisabeth, as forest owner or manager perspective, you are very positive about the future of the forest industry in Europe. Is that wishful thinking, or is it? Because there are these the resource challenges, the competition with the South challenges. So, but
maybe our character is optimistic.
Yeah,
but
that's always good.
I think that everybody, and especially forest owners, we understand the risks what we are facing in the future. When the climate is coming warmer and warmer, it means that there are much more, as we heard, bark beetle, for example, forest fires, they are increasing, wind damages, storm damages, they are increasing, but still the forests are growing better in the north. That was a positive result, really. And that's what I suppose as well. And I think that we can't avoid the climate change, but we have to adapt to that. We can do it by forest management, so that we will manage mixed forest, not monocultures anymore, especially spruce or pine. That's one thing, and so on. And especially in the Middle Europe, we know that when they have these spruce damages, bark beetle damages, it's based on the history that they have planted spruce on the area which used to be mixed forest.
Lisa wanted to add on.
Yeah, and it is also, the truth is that in case we want to be climate neutral by 2040 in EU, that means that we also need forestry to compensate the kind of fossil fuel-based materials with long-lasting and resource-effective bio-based materials.
If I may, I think we have to remember that already today, products from forests are actually substituting fossil products, and we do a work already there today. And I think that there is a lot of research ongoing how we can manage our forest in a better way in the future. For example, when it comes to spruce, we know that there is several type of spruce trees that are more have the problem with get rotten very easily, and we can find the mothers and fathers that will not do that, and we can make through some, for example, the research projects on somatic embryonesis, where we can try to plant the right plants in the right place. So I am very optimistic about that research can help us to actually work against these problems that we see from climate change. Actually.
Lisa, I want to come back to one remark. You said we need forestry, and that is that's certainly very positive. But do we also need a different type of forestry in Europe or in the north that pays more respect to biodiversity.
Yeah.
And are the current trends actually going in that right, if we call that a right direction?
Yeah, I'm pragmatic, and that's why I said that we need forestry, because we need the products that we consume. But the key thing is that we need less. So at the time we are over-consuming, we are using the natural resources 1.5 times more than nature provides us per year, and here in North 3 times more. So the key is that we need to produce and consume much less. And that also comes to the fact that forestry as well needs to be more resource effective. So not any kind of forestry, but the products which will last long and which will also give food for the green transition and system change in the way that we really make a huge change in the way we live.
Yeah. So first a remark from the audience, Hylander.
Hello, Nippe Hylander. I was a former member of the selection committee, so this is fascinating to see what has happened over the years. My question concerns so to say, let's call it the dynamic impacts. We heard about dynamic models. The dynamic impacts of reduced harvesting that you're saying. Let me give you 2 examples where this can have. One of the impacts could be that if we change the silviculture so that we have prolonged times, we may get a larger share of sawlogs. That has a dynamic impact on the products market. The other example would be what Gert-Jan mentioned, that we do see in Central Europe an increasing production of hardwoods. So, will we, within Europe, develop more of the use of hardwoods in construction, not only in pulp, where it's pretty much used? And one good example I saw in ETH in Zurich 2 years ago, where they were saying, we have too much beech here, too much beech wood. Couldn't we use that in a smart way when we produce cross-laminated timber? Because it's even better than the softwoods in compression mode. Yeah. So that's a way of dynamic effect on the whole system. Do you have any comments on that? Maybe the question goes to the presenters actually, but to the 4 of you, thank you.
Yeah, I think that was it for me or for everybody? You are glad to answer.
Okay,
Yeah,
if I start. I absolutely believe that, as I said earlier, I think our industry will change. And for example, we know that we will have more birch in our forest in Sweden in the future. And already now there is discussions ongoing and how can we take care of that. And there was a memorandum of understanding actually signed with France just a few weeks ago, where we will look into this part and look upon how can we develop new products out of hardwood. France has also a lot of hardwoods, which they don't use very efficiently today, actually.
And yes, from my perspective, we need products where the carbon stays long. So that's key important. And maybe the forest specialist can answer more.
Okay. I was thinking to put this question to Max, because you are looking in the wood flows and the efficiency.
I can also comment on that, because what both of you have said, I wanted to synthesize a little bit. Substitution and complementing actually the products on the market. I think it is very important to bear in mind that communicating a substitution effect that may be too large actually doesn't benefit the climate in the end. It is very important to communicate the substitution effect, which is the climate benefit in terms of the fossil greenhouse gas avoidance from using wood products over non-wood products, or concrete in construction, steel in construction, plastics and so forth, by the use of bio-based products. This is something that is really important here, not to miscommunicate. And the substitution effect, regarding your term that you use, dynamics, here it is important to bear in mind that, for example, Sweden wants to become climate neutral by 2045. Other countries like China, they want to become climate neutral by 2060 or so. So the fossil greenhouse gas emission balances, they will change in a very dynamic way, or they should, but we don't know how they will actually do so. So these are just some thoughts about this.
I fully agree that if you think about the forestry and carbon sink and these forest damages in Central Europe, they will change spruce to the beech, mainly beech. And we don't know after 30 or after 50 or 100 years what is the demand of the beech. It means that there's a great demand for new product development concerning beech, especially beech, because there are good quality beech and low quality beech. And I feel so that more or less, if we don't think about more long rotation time, but we have to think how we can use this engineer wood of small scale trees for long lasting construction, for example.
Yeah. And I will give you the word, and I want to reiterate that the young scientists are certainly welcome to chip in. Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Markku Ellila. I'm the CEO of Technology Academy Finland. We hand out the Millennium Technology Prize. My question concerns the use of energy. In Gert-Jan's presentation, you showed quite a pessimistic view on how the fossil versus renewable energy is evolving. However, in the last couple of years, the International Energy Agency has renewed their view on the world energy outlook considerably. And if you look at several European countries where the power grid is the limiting factor in the increase of renewable energy usage in electricity, there can be a significant surplus of low-cost energy in many countries in the next 10 years, even 5 years. Do you see opportunities for the forest sector in using, if the cost of energy has been a constraint, if abundant amounts of low-cost energy is available? Does that represent opportunities, and what kind of opportunities?
But low-cost renewable energy, or renewable? Yes.
Well, I don't believe in low-cost renewable energy, to begin with. Actually, I mean, in reality, I think that we should be aware of that energy will be expensive in the future. I think that from different perspectives. And of course, there is still a possibility to use more energy out from wood. In most countries, we don't use the whole tree yet. So there is still good opportunity to use more of the tree than we do today, actually, for different products, not only for energy, but also perhaps for other products in the future, more advanced products.
Anyone else on the energy?
Yeah, I would say that like forest products and wood, they are so valuable that the last thing is to use them for burning. And of course, we still do need them for a specific kind of transportation as a biofuel, but that's only for a certain period. But anyway, so that the wood products should really be like developed to higher. Yeah.
I also fully agree with Lisa about this cascade principle, so that forest should use to the most valuable products first, and then just the rest to the energy. And now, if we know that lignin, for example, is used finally to the energy. If we find some new products made of lignin, what will be the energy production after that?
Yeah.
Just a small comment. And also, we need to remember that we need to reduce the consumption of energy, because we cannot, continue the way we have done it so far. That also comes to your pricing of energy. Yes. So energy efficiency is the best fuel.
Yeah.
I agree to this point, and I think it's very important that you mention this here, because it could lead, if there was a surplus of renewable energy in Sweden, for example, all the black liquor, for example, in the pulp mills, it would not have to be burned, which would make exempt opportunities for producing all kinds of different products that many young researchers here are putting their research on. But my concern is then it's a sort of a rebound effect. So you save something here, but then instead of that you produce in the end just a complement to the overall production load. So this is something I would see a bit cautious.
Yeah. Nicola had a question.
So, hello, thanks. I'm Nicola Bozzolan, young researcher. I'm sorry, I have to step back a bit from this conversation on bioenergy to come back to the lack of food in the future. And so, because I think it's really interesting. So I was wondering, like, okay, we have seen to the presentation there are many disturbances. We also see that the forest in the north is growing better, and we also know that probably in the next 20, 30 years we still have a lot of coniferous wood, which is basically, the industry now is specialized, especially in of conifer wood. But my question is, like, now the approach of forestry, I have the feeling is going more to mixed forest, mixed forest not only at age, not only on species, but also age. So trying to really create a complex structure to improve biodiversity. So my question is, especially for industry, is like, how do you see this into the future regarding like using, difficulties of harvesting, of using also different type of diameters, different type of species, and considering the fact that we are highly specialized in using conifers. And the second question is, what's your vision regarding like a possible, lack of resource? So how has the forest industry is going to adapt to this lack or possible lack? Because finally, final note is that bio-based, innovative bioproduct is actually a niche for now. It's not gonna it's not taking a lot of raw materials. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks. Who wants to take this? The complex.
If I start first to the second question, if the industry doesn't have enough wood, what are their choice? Just close the doors or reduce the production. No other choice. That's so easy. But then we go to the mixed forest. I think that here in the Northern Europe, we are lucky because we don't have too many tree species. We have mainly pine, spruce, two sort of species of birds, and then some other broadleaves. No more. And we know that for pine and for birds and good quality spruce, there is a demand enough in the coming future. We don't know what's happening after 50 years, but that's how it looks like.
But the spruce in the southern Sweden, southern Norway, it's already affected by this bark beetle is an enormous risk.
It's a huge risk, and it will come worse. And I have a feel that whether it is atmosphere, it fluctuates. And now, I don't know, are we now going to the better way? But finally the trend is so that the climate is coming warmer and these bark beetle damages will increase. That's a fact.
Yeah, there's two questions here in front and one in the back there.
Hi, Per Österberg, Kopparfors Skogar. I was wondering if you go 50 years from now and imagine we take up no fossils any longer. We take away 80% of the energy source we have today and probably for other products too. And we also add 1 billion of people, at least, I guess. Can you imagine how the world functions at that time? How do we live? How do we make our housing? How do we have the products that we need for living, even if we go down, especially we in the West, the prosperous world? How can we not use what we can grow on the land in farming, in forestry? It has to be really, really important to balance there. How much can we get from the land and still have the biodiversity? It's really a balance point it's all about. But we tend at the moment to talk very much from where we are today, and we take small steps against the future. I don't think any of the models we have seen today will work, explaining how it will work 50 years from now if we don't start there and backtrack how to come there.
Who wants to comment?
I can continue that. I think that's very interesting what you bring up here, and as also some of the presenters said in the morning here, that you really have to start where we will be and how do we come there. And I absolutely do believe that we have actually a responsibility from sustainability point of view to actually secure that our forest has a nice growth in the future and find different ways to increase the growth. At the same time, of course, as we take care of the biodiversity. But we should also remember that if you look upon the biodiversity crisis up in the Nordics, okay, we can do absolutely more than we have done. But if you look on the south, how does it look there? I mean, they have even bigger problems on the biodiversity side than we have up here in the north. And it's easy to forget that, actually, when we talk about the south.
Yeah, that was a very good question, and I really think that although the challenge is so huge, we still need to do all we can. And also considering the biodiversity crisis in South, it's because of us, because we are the ones who have started this overconsumption. But anyway, the key is that we really need to combat climate crisis and biodiversity at the same time, because they are so heavily linked to each other, and to do all what we can. So we have no other choice. And anyway, as we know, so we are all dependent. All what we are doing is dependent on biodiversity and climate, of course, because they are linked. Economies, our food security, health, everything. Economies.
Thank you.
Forest industry.
I could also just briefly comment on this. I mean, we've seen in France a few years ago what happens if the price for petrol or oil increases a lot. Then movements such as the Gilets jaunes start, and then I think the focus about the problems the society faces shifts away from this climate or biodiversity debate also. I think these are realities we would face in these kind of situations. Yeah, I leave it with that.
The inclusive side, indeed, of society.
Small comment. Maybe the modelers can help us here. We heard modeling in the morning.
The lady in the back.
Yes, Joanna Hagelberg Stora Enso. Unfortunately not a young researcher, but I wish I could restart my career and be one. Building on then, like many presenters have said today, that the future growth in forest is still in the south, meaning southern hemisphere even. What opportunities and threats do you see that gives us as an industry?
I have to start again. Of course, for the industry, it's possible to expand the industry to the south and globally and establish new pulp plants and so on. That's the one possibility, of course. But other is the risk that are they producing that much, for example, the products which are competing with the products what we are using at the moment. And I feel that that's first facing the birds, of course, but of course the softwood pulpwood made of that. That's because they are breeding of, for example, eucalyptus. It's so quickly, so we don't know what's going to happen if they use, for example, gene manipulation. What's going to happen after coming years? It's a risk, of course.
Yes, I can say a few words also. I think that one opportunity with production in the south hemisphere is, of course, that the rotation periods are much shorter than they are up here in the north. So you can change quicker than we can do up here, absolutely. But on the other hand, I mean, south hemisphere, we talk about warmer climate, you need the rain, and can we really foresee what happens with the rain? And I think that is actually a threat to the plantations in the southern hemisphere already today, lack of rain actually, which the trees really need.
But does this lead even to more land, well, sometimes we call it land grabbing in the south for the production in the north. And there's already a lot of land grabbing going on for carbon credits, for conservation, and then also for production. Well, something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the, I think there was, yeah, somewhere. Oh,
Thomas.
now there's a lot.
A lot.
There was someone there, wasn't it? Yeah. And then Ron, and then Johanna.
Okay, hi, I'm Thomas Turesson. I'm here in the position as a board member of Kopparforsskogar. In Europe, we have a net emission of carbon dioxide of circa 4,000 megatons per year. And the goal in the European Union is to reduce that until zero in 2042. That's a very, very challenging goal. It's a good goal, but it's very challenging. And the thing is that we need carbon for many things, not only for energy. We need them for buildings, for packaging, and to some extent probably also for energy. For example, should we have aeroplanes in the future, we probably need some sort of bio-based carbon. And my conclusion from this is that we can't really both get away from the fossils, because that is the really big thing. We also need to use the forest. And my question then is to the very wise people here. Do you see any other possibilities to get those carbon molecules to what we need in the future? Because we will need carbon molecules than forestry.
Max,
Yeah,
maybe that's
maybe,
closest to you.
Yeah, like a spontaneous thought about this is, I wrote down the question, what do we need? You said we need construction materials, we need the energy, we need the packaging. And when you said packaging, I was then wondering, do we need the packaging? I mean, there are other trends for like a more sustainable society or so that don't include packaging, for example. So in Germany, there are shops, for example, where you come with your package yourself, so to say, and you don't need additional containers for the foodstuff that you buy. So that would make space, or let's say the volume that you would dedicate for this packaging, you could use then for construction if it is technically possible also. So these are things that would not complement, but they would in fact substitute something here without additional emissions when we speak of the climate.
Yeah. I want to keep the replies a bit shorter because there are more and more hands coming up. Ron Sederoff in the back, one of the laureates from a couple of years ago.
Thank you for the introduction. As an American looking at the forest industry on a global scale, I am amazed that it is possible to grow a tree in Brazil in less than 6 years, and compare that to the time it takes to grow a tree here in Scandinavia, yet the industry here flourishes. Can that continue? The other point I want to make is that we don't exactly know what we're doing. There are major factors that are unknown, and incidents that affect the biology and the climate are becoming more intense with time. And I would ask Mike Winfield about the role of forest pathology, because events such as bark beetle infestations in Canada are greater than we have ever seen infestations before, and that the future of forestry may be determined on a biological basis, and the biodiversity inherent in our populations looking forward. I would also argue, as a biotechnologist, that it has not been discussed whether there is a future in forestry for the directed genetic modification of trees, which would expand the ability to grow species and to make products in places that have not been considered before.
Yeah, maybe that's good that you respond to that. I don't know. Yeah.
When a very eminent scientist puts one on the spot, and I actually had a different question completely. So Ron has raised a really important issue, and quite frankly, I mean, I'm a tree health specialist and work in that community, and we're really, really worried. Ron, you're referring to beetle, and a couple of others in the talks today referred to mountain pine beetle, then European spruce beetle, so Ipstopographus here, and these tipping points that are being reached where everything starts to collapse. And there are other examples. All of those are native pests and pathogens. And their impact is being driven, so there's a shoot leaf blight pathogen that wasn't in Scandinavia some years ago and is spreading and moving up, and it's definitely a climate change issue, or the Araucaria dying in the south of Chile, many thousands and thousands of hectares. That's the one side. The other side is the introduced pests and pathogens. And I oftentimes ask a question, when is Europe, well, you talk about the south, which is very interesting, because I thought you were talking about Spain, but remember, the people forget there's a southern hemisphere, and we should have more of those people in these kinds of audiences to have the fair discussion, but that's another issue. But another huge threat is the introduction of new pests and pathogens. Mm-hmm. And with these very uniform forests of the boreal, we're just waiting for the next really big one, and those are introduced pests, and their impact is massive. So I mean, quite frankly, and I think Ron, you're sitting up there somewhere, are saying is we need much more science, and we need to communicate the science to the public, actually to governments, to convince, governments are there because of the public. Public vote for the governments. Elizabeth, you raised, I think, some of that issue. You talked about root rot, so heterobasidion here, really important. That's a relatively easy problem. There is a relatively easy solution. You talked about the genetic modification, but the other is just at harvesting, treating the stumps. And I can tell you that most companies are not doing that because it's expensive and, well, nothing will happen. But once you have a new infection, those centers are there for decades. But big issues, we need more science, but we need a lot more communication with decision makers if we're going to get anywhere. I'm concerned. I'm seriously concerned.
Thank you very much. We have roughly some 10-12 minutes still, so I would like to pick up a few other topics, but there were two. Johanna had a hand, or no? Oh, Henrik first. And then the lady there.
We heard already today that more or less half of the European consumption of forest is for energy. And that, of course, is due to the European Union's policies, which is burning wood is considered climate neutral, which I think is not the fact, but that's the policy. So there, in my view, is a huge reserve of wood. So I wouldn't be that pessimistic regarding use of wood for other purposes. There's a half of the wood is burnt. Mm-hmm. So, and that's a lot. You had, I think it was in Jan Gert, in your, it says 300 million cubic meters.
Yeah.
So my question is, have you considered that in the pessimistic views on northern forest industries?
I can shortly answer from the EU policy perspective. EU is making the new climate policy next spring, and the Economic Forum of Finland, ECO, already published their vision, what should happen. So you are very powerful, all of you. So you just go into this politics and try to make EU make a change there so that the wood is no more burned in EU level. That's what we are trying to do, at least.
But it's very hard if these subsidies are there to steer the wood flow in a more efficient way.
Yep.
Johanna may want to...
Yeah, I'm actually continuing from Henrik's point, so that when wood is burned, quite many of that comes from the processes as carbon dioxide. How do you see the role of biogenic carbon dioxide? If we have this cheap electricity, we have hydrogen economy, then we could have closed circles and make a lot of things. We could mitigate the climate change simultaneously, provide raw materials for the people, because everybody's talking about consumption, but what are the actions how can we reduce consumption? That's another thing, but that's not my question. The biogenic carbon dioxide.
Yeah, I would like to comment on this and then link also then to the Global South, because there are large opportunities for improved cooking devices in households. There a lot of fuel wood is actually used still nowadays, and if these kitchen facilities, so to say, or stoves are improved, there's, I think, for the climate as well as for the health of the persons, there's a big potential.
Yes,
yeah,
Elisabeth?
if I may also make a comment in this area, perhaps not exactly about what you said, but I think our biggest problem is that the fossil fuels are too cheap.
Yeah.
And we very often forget that in the discussion. So the question is, what are we going to do about the fact that the fossil fuels are too cheap?
Very true.
Yeah, indeed. You saw in the spike of the energy prices 1 year ago how fast people start to convert their energy provision and reduce energy consumption. But of course it hits the people with a small wallet very hard, and that's something not to forget. Yes.
Hi, my question is a bit related to this topic, and it also works especially on the point about increased communication. I'm wondering, if you have suggestions on how we can improve communication between stakeholders. For example, I have noticed some issues, for example, one time a representative from a forestry company was talking at our institute, and I asked them, are you interested to know how trees respond to climate change? And they said, no, we already know. And I was like, but then in addition to this, it's peculiar that, there are people who, I guess many of us know, who are actively trying to protect forests in Europe for the sake of biodiversity. But if there was maybe more communication, that they knew, okay, well, if this area is protected, then actually the deforestation will be transferred to the global south, it might change their decision making. And I think I just wonder about any suggestions you have for people making time for each other to communicate and maybe come to a decision together, because it seems like loads of people do have best intentions. Just
Any of the panel members want to reflect on communication?
Communication is that's
please.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Communication is really needed, and very strongly. So when we all are behind a certain thing, it will start moving onwards like a snowball effect. Yeah, communication is very important. It's no use to do science, if I may say, unless you have the means how to communicate about the results. That makes research impactful. And research is done to change societies, to change how we are doing, behaving, whatever the science is and research is about.
This is a good point that I also had at least on the list. Is our education really ready? We also have quite some people from universities here, of course. Is our education ready for these big changes and incorporating the communication and the social sciences, where we see, for example, in well, we did a PhD summer school in September in Bialowice in East Poland. There were 27 PhD students there. And they all do some research concerning forests, but there was not one, let's say, traditional forester amongst them. So it's people doing global vegetation modeling, it's people doing satellites, it's people doing disturbances, it's soil sciences, all around the forest. But, well, let's say, I don't know if we need that, but the traditional forester was not there, and that's remarkable, I think. Yes, Antti and then Sten.
Thanks for raising the issue of a traditional forester. I take two things related with climate change. We are blaming that for everything and then say that this is result of a climate change. Obviously, that is a really super important factor, but tree species have their biological lifespan. And in Eastern Canada in the 80s, I was there doing training, and there was huge deadwood areas of ABS and spruce. And when I went there 30 years after that all had recovered, and the biologists or foresters said that, well, the lifespan of ABS there is about 75 years, and then the whole ecosystem collapses. And I have a hypothesis that also the spruce that we are now seeing dying here in the flatlands of Europe where we have planted it, besides it has been a success story starting from 50s, but now it's ending. I have a hypothesis that if we now regenerate, plant the spruce again, it will survive 40, 50 years. And again, it becomes so old that it doesn't tolerate the new climate. But really, like the modeler said, that we should not only look at the climate, but also the basic biology and forestry before making this vast decision to convert the whole forestry system to entirely something else.
Yeah, good point. Sten.
Yeah, thank you. I have three comments, and I will start with the educational system. How the education is working, it's forming the view of thinking for a very long time, and it's sort of setting the frame of a profession. And if you are going to change things, I think we need a systems revolution in the educational forest system. That is one issue. The second issue is the communication. To communicate the difficult issues, you have to reach the people in the general public. And that is extremely difficult if we want to have a change. And we have not tackled how do we communicate these big changes to the general public so they understand it. If you are not getting the general public on track, nothing will happen. I will give you one example. I was speaking a couple of weeks ago for big forest owners, private forest owners here in Sweden. And I was speaking about how the world is influencing it. And they got mad with me by saying, we are not here to hear what's going on in the world. We want to hear what should we do with the Swedish forest. So we have a huge communication problem. The third issue is the dimension of CO2. We should not forget that CO2 is a valuable raw material. We should use it. We should do a lot of science in trying to utilize it in our production. Too little is done on that issue. Thank you.
Lisa,
one thing how to solve this communication issue is, and here are many deans and rectors from universities, universities should invest on communication department as well, much more, at least in Finland where I come from, much more, so that we know what's happening there in everyday's language.
And it's a different kind of communication.
Yes, yes, right.
Max, may I?
Yeah.
About education, you are still.
Yeah, I'm still a PhD student.
Yeah,
exactly.
Still a bit student.
I was thinking about my own institution, SLU, as a role model kind of university in the topics that we address here in these days. And SLU, I don't know the exact dates, I just know that it intended to double the number of students until, I don't know, 25 or 30 or so. But actually the trend is the opposite. And I can't understand that. I'm fascinated by these topics and I really don't know why so few students want to enroll in these kind of programs and be part of this dialogue and action making towards this transformation of a more sustainable society.
We can have a discussion over lunch on that one.
Yes.
Then, well, it's 4 minutes before the lunch, but we can also close the session here, I think. If there's no other very burning point that someone wants to bring in. I have other topics, but maybe it's not good to rush through some other topics right now. Then I want to thank the panelists very much for an active participation.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And yes, you can. And thank you all, certainly also the audience for a very active participation, and the online audience as well for staying online. It's been, we come to the formal closing of the formal part. There will still be a session this afternoon with the laureates and the young scientists, but the bigger session is finished hereby. I certainly want to thank the organizers, for example, Shiva and Sari and Ola it is, and the technicians back there for making this work and organizing this huge event. It's an enormous organization, so big thanks for the organizers.